April 22, 1945, 14:38 hours, Field Medical Station, near Celle, northern Germany. The tent smelled of antiseptic and blood. Canvas walls filtered afternoon sunlight into a dim amber glow that made everything look bruised. 32 wounded German soldiers lay on stretchers, waiting for British medical personnel to decide who could be saved and who would have to wait. Among them, incongruous and terrified, sat a woman. She pressed herself against the tent's corner support pole, making herself as small as possible. 26 years old, formerly a telegraph operator, now just a prisoner wearing a Wehrmacht auxiliary uniform soaked through with someone else's blood. Her name was Anna. She had been found in a destroyed communications bunker 3 hours earlier, uninjured but trapped beneath fallen timber, pulled from the rubble by British soldiers who didn't ask questions before dragging her to the medical station with the other survivors. A British soldier, medical corpsman, Red Cross armband, maybe 30, moved through the rows of wounded, triaging with efficient brutality. This one needs surgery, this one needs morphine, this one won't make it through the night. When he reached Anna, he stopped, looked at her blood-soaked uniform, looked at her face, pale and rigid with fear. He knelt, reached for the front of her dress. Anna's hands came up defensively. Her voice broke, bit nicked. "Please don't hurt me." The corpsman froze. His hands still extended, fingers inches from the fabric. He looked at her face, at her eyes, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not impatience, but recognition. Recognition of what she thought was about to happen. He pulled his hand back. Held both hands up, palms visible, universal gesture of non-threat. Spoke in slow, careful German. "I need to check if you're wounded. The blood, is it yours?" Anna stared at him. At his hands raised and empty. At his face, tired but not cruel. At the Red Cross armband that meant medic, not combatant. She shook her head slowly. Not my blood." "Good. But I still need to check. Make sure you're not injured." He gestured at the blood-soaked uniform. "I need to see if the fabric is stuck to wounds. If I don't check properly, infection could kill you in 3 days. Do you understand?" She nodded barely. "I'm going to open your collar and check your shoulders and chest for injuries. Just medical examination. Nothing else. My commander is right there." He pointed to a British captain examining a soldier 10 feet away, "and there are 40 witnesses in this tent. You are safe. I need you to believe that. Can you let me examine you?" Anna looked at the captain. At the other medics moving through the wounded. At the corpsman's face, patient and professional, waiting for permission rather than simply taking. She lowered her hands. Nodded again. The corpsman reached forward slowly, gave her time to change her mind, then carefully opened the top buttons of her uniform dress. Checked her shoulders, her collarbone, the visible portions of her chest, all with clinical efficiency, never lingering, never touching more than necessary for medical assessment. "No wounds. You're fine. Just covered in someone else's blood, which will get cleaned up." He rebut-toned her dress with the same careful efficiency. Stay here. I'll have someone bring you water and clean clothing. You'll be processed with the other prisoners after we finish with the wounded. You're safe now. Do you understand? You're safe." Anna sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. She had expected violation. She received medical care. She had braced for assault. She received professionalism. And the corpsman's first instinct, when she flinched and begged him not to hurt her, had been to stop. To explain. To ask permission. They feared monsters. They found medics. And nothing in the propaganda had prepared them for that. Anna had served in a Wehrmacht signals unit since 1943, operating radio equipment in a bunker near Celle. She had joined not from ideology but from necessity. Single women were being conscripted into auxiliary service, and refusing meant punishment. So she learned Morse code, learned radio protocols, spent 12-hour shifts transcribing messages she wasn't permitted to understand, and told herself she wasn't really part of the war, just part of the machinery that kept it running. When British forces reached Celle in mid-April 1945, her unit received orders to evacuate. But the roads were clogged with refugees, the vehicles were out of fuel, and Allied aircraft controlled the skies. So they stayed in the bunker, monitoring frequencies that had gone silent, waiting for orders that never came. On April 22, British artillery found their position. A shell collapsed one wall. Anna survived by luck, trapped but not crushed, buried under timber that created an air pocket just large enough. British soldiers dug her out 2 hours later. They didn't ask if she was armed, didn't question her role, just pulled her from the rubble and directed her toward the medical station with the other survivors. She walked in shock, her uniform soaked with blood from a wounded soldier she tried to help, her mind unable to process that she was now a prisoner, that the war was over for her, that whatever happened next was entirely beyond her control. The medical station was organized chaos. British doctors and corpsmen moved with practiced efficiency, sorting the wounded into categories. Immediate surgery can wait, morphine only. They worked on German soldiers with the same intensity they'd apply to their own, saving lives not from compassion but from professional obligation, from the understanding that wounded men were still men, that medicine existed outside of politics. Anna sat in her corner watching this happen. Watching a British surgeon operate on a German soldier, hands moving with focused precision. Watching a medic hold water to a dying man's lips, speaking quietly in German, "You're all right. Just rest." Watching the same professional care applied regardless of uniform, regardless of 6 years of war, regardless of everything. When the corpsman returned an hour later, he brought a British Army nurse, female, perhaps 40, with kind eyes and efficient manner. The nurse carried a bundle, clean water, soap, towels and a fresh dress, British Army issue, altered for women, marked with a brown patch. "Come with me," the nurse said in accented German. "There's a privacy screen behind the supply tent. You can wash and change there. I'll stay nearby in case you need assistance, but I won't watch. You deserve privacy." Anna followed numbly. Behind the supply tent, a canvas partition created a small private area. The nurse handed her the supplies. "Take your time. When you're ready, come find me. I'll be right around the corner. Call if you need help." She left. Gave Anna privacy, trusted her not to flee, treated her like a person deserving of dignity rather than a prisoner requiring constant supervision. Anna stripped off the blood-soaked uniform with trembling hands. Washed with cold water and harsh soap that stung but cleansed. Put on the clean dress, too large but clean, dry, not soaked in someone else's blood. And for the first time since the bunker collapsed, she allowed herself to feel something other than terror. "The British nurse gave me privacy," she would write later on scraps of paper that became a diary. "Not because I asked, not because she had to, just because she believed I deserved it." That small gesture of trust, after hours of expecting violation, unmade me completely. I cried while washing, not from fear but from the overwhelming relief of being treated like a human. If this moment already changed how you see the war, subscribe, the next will surprise you even more. The transport to England took 5 days. First a truck convoy to a processing center near Hamburg, then a train to Cuxhaven, then a ship crossing the North Sea. At each stage, Anna braced for the abuse she'd been warned about, the inevitable consequence of being a female prisoner in male custody. Instead, she received systematic processing, paperwork, medical examination by female doctors, assignment to women-only transport, guards who maintained professional distance. Not gentle, the system was designed for efficiency, not comfort, but not cruel. Just bureaucratic, impersonal, surprisingly respectful of basic dignity. The ship crossing was rough. Most prisoners were seasick. Anna wasn't. She'd grown up on the Baltic coast, knew the motion of water. She stood on deck despite the cold, watching Germany disappear into gray distance, trying to process what had happened in the medical tent, the way the corpsman had stopped when she begged, had explained, had asked permission before touching her. A British sailor, young and bored with guard duty, joined her at the rail. He said something in English she didn't understand. When she shook her head, he tried again in broken German. "Cold, yes. Yes, cold." He nodded, pulled out a cigarette, offered her one. She hesitated, was this allowed? Then took it. He lit hers, then his own, and they smoked in silence, watching gray water roll beneath gray sky. Just an ordinary moment. Enemy and enemy, sharing cigarettes because both were cold and bored, because small courtesies existed even in war's aftermath, because not every interaction required hostility or dominance. They arrived at a camp in Norfolk, rows of Nissen huts surrounded by wire, functional but not deliberately harsh. Anna was assigned to a barracks holding 60 German women, most captured in the war's final weeks. They received British Army surplus clothing with brown patches, ration cards, work assignments. The system was impersonal but clear. Follow regulations, work assigned details, 'cause no problems and you'll be treated fairly. On the third day, during a medical screening, Anna was examined by a British Army doctor. Female, middle-aged, with efficient hands and a no-nonsense manner. The examination was thorough but professional. Pulse, blood pressure, lungs, eyes, throat, checking for disease and malnutrition. When it was complete, the doctor made notes on a chart. "You're underweight but otherwise healthy. You'll receive supplemental rations for 4 weeks. Any questions? Anna found her voice. Why do you examine us? We're prisoners. The doctor looked up. You're also people. Sick prisoners spread disease which affects guards and staff. Healthy prisoners can work and eventually be repatriated. It's practical, not kind. But the corpsman at cell. He asked permission before examining me. That wasn't just practical. The doctor's expression softened slightly. No. That was also decent. The two aren't mutually exclusive. She closed the chart. Practical means we keep you healthy for logistical reasons. Decent means we recognize you're frightened humans who deserve explanation and respect. Most of us try for both. The system governing this treatment had been established in 1940, refined through 5 years of managing prisoners. A directive from the War Office stated clearly, female prisoners of war require separate accommodation, female medical personnel for intimate examinations, and protection from assault consistent with security requirements. Male guards will maintain professional distance. Violations will be court-martialed. The reasoning was threefold. Security. Assault created resentment, resentment created resistance, resistance created security problems. Diplomacy. Germany held British women in auxiliary services. Reciprocity mattered desperately to families hoping their daughters would be treated honorably. Morality. Because maintaining standards under pressure was the entire justification for fighting, and abandoning those standards meant losing even in victory. A supplementary memo dated March 1945 addressed medical examinations specifically. Female POWs will be examined by female medical personnel whenever possible. When male medical staff must conduct examinations, a female chaperone will be present, procedures will be explained clearly, and patient consent will be obtained for all non-emergency care. The corpsman at cell had stopped when Anna begged. Had explained. Had asked permission. Not from kindness but from training, from a system designed by people who believed that even prisoners deserved medical care delivered with basic respect, that consent mattered even in captivity, that professional distance protected both prisoner and practitioner. Daily life found its patterns. Wake at 0600. Roll call. Breakfast, porridge, toast, tea. Work assignments from 0800 to 1700. Agricultural labor, laundry, kitchen duties, clerical work for those with language skills. The work was hard but not punishing, supervised but not brutalized. Anna was assigned to agricultural detail, working on British farms that had lost workers to military service. The work was backbreaking. Planting, weeding, harvesting, lifting, bending hour after hour under sun or rain or wind. But the British farmer who owned the land, 60-something, too old for service, managing with POW labor and his wife, treated them exactly as he would any farm workers. Demonstrated tasks clearly, corrected mistakes without anger, provided tea breaks and occasional extra rations when the work was particularly heavy. One afternoon, during planting, Anna's hands began bleeding, blisters from the hoe handle, split open by continued work. She tried to hide them, afraid that showing weakness would mean punishment. But the farmer's wife noticed, took her hands gently, examined them with a practiced eye. "These need cleaning and bandaging," she said in careful German. "Come to the house." Anna followed her to a small kitchen, where the farmer's wife washed the wounds with warm water, applied ointment, wrapped them in clean bandages with surprising gentleness. "My son worked these fields before the war," she said quietly. "North Africa now. I hope wherever he is, if he's wounded, someone bandages his hands with care. That's all any mother can hope for." She gave Anna worn gloves, leather, patched but functional. "Wear these tomorrow. Protect the bandages while they heal." Anna held the gloves, unable to speak. This woman's son was fighting Germans, might have died fighting Germans, and still she bandaged a German prisoner's hands and gave her gloves because wounded hands couldn't work properly, because practicality and decency weren't opposites, because maybe somewhere another woman was showing similar mercy to her son. "She bandaged my hands like I mattered," Anna wrote that night. "Not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, just as someone whose hands were bleeding and bleeding needed attention. I don't know how to reconcile that gentleness with everything I was taught about the British." Personal stories emerged in the barracks after lights out, whispered confessions building collective understanding from individual experiences. Greta, 34, had been a nurse in a field hospital. She had expected the worst during British captivity, had braced for the violations she'd been warned were inevitable. Instead, she'd been examined by female doctors, assigned to medical work in the camp infirmary, treated with professional respect by British medical staff who valued competence over nationality. "They see me as a nurse who knows her work," she told Anna one night. Not a German who deserves punishment. That distinction matters more than I can explain. Frida, 28, worked in the camp laundry. She had spilled a basin of scalding water on her arm, a clumsy accident born of exhaustion. The British corporal supervising, female, Welsh, practical, had immediately provided first aid, applied burn ointment, sent Frida to the medical tent for proper treatment, then reassigned her to lighter duties until the burn healed. She cared that I was hurt, Frida said quietly. Not because she liked me, we barely speak to each other, but because injured workers are inefficient, and preventing infection is easier than treating it. But the result is the same. My arm was treated, I was given time to heal. I'm grateful regardless of motive. Margarethi, 41, worked in administration. Her British supervisor had praised her translation work, called her competent, recommended her for more complex assignments. Simple professional acknowledgement, but after months of being defined solely by defeat, being recognized for skill rather than nationality had restored something she'd thought was permanently lost. He treats me like a colleague who happens to be a prisoner, she said. That small reframing, from prisoner who sometimes works to worker who happens to be prisoner, changes everything. Summer brought longer days, harder work, but also small mercies. The camp kitchen received a shipment of fruit, apples, nothing exotic but fruit nonetheless. British officers authorized distribution to prisoners, 1 apple per person, no ceremony, just systematic fairness. Anna ate hers slowly, making it last, savoring sweetness she hadn't tasted in months. The woman beside her, Helga, 25, a former factory worker, cried quietly while eating hers. Why are you crying? Anna asked. Because it's an apple. Just an apple. And they gave it to us because they had apples and were humans who deserve fruit occasionally. That simple kindness after everything. I don't know how to process it. Anna understood. The apple wasn't kindness in the sentimental sense. It was resource management. Healthy prisoners needed varied nutrition. Fruit prevented scurvy. Distribution prevented hoarding and conflict. But the practical outcome was the same. German prisoners eating British apples because someone had decided maintaining their health included occasional fruit. Practical mercy. The most reliable kind. August brought Red Cross mail. Anna received a letter from her sister, forwarded from Berlin through Switzerland, 3 months in transit. Her sister was alive, working in the rubble, surviving on rations and hope. The letter was carefully worded, censored clearly, but between the lines Anna could read the truth. Berlin was destroyed, but life continued. Anna wrote back immediately, 3 pages describing the camp, the work, the British farmers, the bandaged hands, the systematic fairness. She wrote, I am treated better than I expected. They are not kind in the way we understand kindness, but they are fair, and fairness applied consistently feels like kindness from the inside. She handed the letter to a British sergeant for censorship review. He read it, stamped it for mailing, looked at her. You're settling in well? Yes, sir. Better than I feared. Good. The farmer you work for, Thompson, he spoke well of you. Said you're a hard worker. That matters here. It was the first time a British officer had acknowledged her work positively. The first time someone had suggested that competence transcended nationality, that even prisoners could be valued for contribution rather than just managed for compliance. He said the farmer spoke well of me, Anna wrote that night. As if I was a person whose work quality mattered, whose effort deserved acknowledgement. I had forgotten that I could be valued for something other than my surrender. If you're seeing this war in a new light, subscribe. The next scene will challenge you even more. In October, the camp organized a small memorial service. Not political, just recognition that everyone had lost someone. German and British losses acknowledged together, grief recognized without hierarchy or comparison. A British chaplain spoke in English, then German, his message simple and profound. We fought each other. We killed each other. We lost people we loved. But the dead are gone, and those of us who remain must decide. Will we honor their memories with continued hatred, or with the hard work of building peace? The choice is ours daily. After the service, the chaplain approached Anna. How are you managing? She thought about lying, settled on honesty. Better than I expected. I thought capture meant violation. Instead it means routine work, basic fairness. I don't know what to do with that. Why does it trouble you? Because it challenges everything I was taught. If you're fair when you could be cruel, maybe we were wrong about everything. And if we were wrong about you, what else were we wrong about? The chaplain nodded. That's called moral reckoning. It's uncomfortable. But it's also how people grow beyond propaganda, how we learn to see each other as humans rather than abstractions. The corpsman who asked permission before examining you, he gave you that gift. The gift of seeing that enemies can be professional, can respect your dignity even in your powerlessness. That gift is uncomfortable because it requires you to rethink certainties. But it's a gift nonetheless. November brought repatriation planning. Anna was in the second wave, low-risk auxiliary, cleared for return to British occupation zone, scheduled for January transport. The news brought relief and fear in equal measure. Relief to go home, fear of what home had become. Before she left, the farmer's wife, Mrs. Thompson, who had bandaged her hands months earlier, gave her a small parcel. Inside, the leather gloves, worn but still functional, and a note in careful German, "For your hands. May they build something better than what was destroyed." Anna held the gloves, overwhelmed. She had been this woman's enemy, had represented the ideology that sent her son to North Africa, had been part, however peripheral, of the machinery that tried to destroy her country. And still Mrs. Thompson had bandaged her bleeding hands, given her gloves, sent her home with a gift and a blessing. The British sergeant who had praised her work gave her a reference letter, standard format, British Army stationery, stating she had been a reliable worker, competent and diligent, recommended for agricultural or clerical positions. "For employment," he said simply. "Germany's a mess. This might help." "Why would you help me find work?" "Because you did good work here. That deserves acknowledgement, regardless of what uniform you wore before." He paused. "And because maybe if enough of us treat each other fairly, we won't have to do this again in 30 years. The convoy left on a gray January morning. Anna sat in the truck, holding Mrs. Thompson's gloves and the sergeant's reference letter, watching the camp disappear behind them. 7 months earlier, a corpsman had reached for her blood-soaked uniform and she had begged him not to hurt her. He had stopped, had explained, had asked permission, had treated her medical examination as exactly that, medical, professional, respectful of her fear and her dignity. That moment, more than any other, had taught her what civilization meant. Not the absence of power differentials, but the restraint powerful people chose to exercise. The corpsman could have proceeded without explanation, could have dismissed her fear as irrelevant, could have treated her examination as his right rather than her consent. Instead he had stopped, had recognized her terror, had asked permission. The ship crossing was calmer this time. Anna stood at the rail, watching England fade, thinking about the corpsman, the nurse who gave her privacy, the doctor who examined her professionally, the farmer's wife who bandaged her hands, the sergeant who wrote her a reference letter. Individual people, operating within a system, making choices that collectively determined whether captivity broke prisoners or merely held them. Germany in January 1946 was a landscape of ruins. Anna found her sister in Berlin, living in a basement apartment, working for American occupation forces. They held each other and cried and didn't speak for long minutes because words felt inadequate. Anna used the reference letter to find work on a British military farm near Hamburg. The irony was profound. Captured by the British, employed by the British, working land administered by people who had been enemies 8 months earlier. But enemies was the wrong word now. They were just people trying to feed a starving population, and Anna was someone who knew farm work and had a letter saying she was competent. She wrote to Mrs. Thompson once in March 1946. Thanked her for the gloves, told her they were worn but still functional, asked about her son. Mrs. Thompson replied in April, "Thomas came home in February. Wounded but alive. He wears bandages on his hands, shrapnel injuries from Italy. I told him about you, about bandaging a German prisoner's hands, about giving you gloves." He said, "Good. Someone probably did the same for me somewhere. We're grateful you're safe." Anna kept both letters, Mrs. Thompson's note and the reference, for the rest of her life. The decades that followed were difficult but survivable. Anna married in 1950, a teacher, kind and thoughtful, who had been a POW in Canada with similar stories. They had 3 children. Built a life from fragments. In 1972, her daughter asked about the war. About captivity. About what it was like to be a prisoner. Anna thought carefully. "I expected violation. I received medical care. I expected cruelty. I received professionalism. I expected to be treated as an enemy deserving punishment. I received treatment as a human deserving basic respect. That reversal taught me more about civilization than any philosophy class." Were they kind to you? Not kind in the emotional sense. Professional. Systematic. But a system designed for restraint and respect produces kind outcomes. The corpsman who stopped when I begged, who asked permission, that was system and training and culture all working together. The individual choice and the institutional framework supporting it. Both mattered. Her daughter considered this. Did it change you? Completely. I learned that propaganda is lies, that enemies are just people in different circumstances, that civilization is a choice renewed daily by individuals operating within systems designed for decency. That corpseman didn't have to ask permission. He chose to because he'd been trained by people who believed consent mattered even in captivity. That choice, multiplied across thousands of similar moments, is what civilization looks like. Anna died in 2001, age 82. Her children found a small wooden box among her possessions. Inside, Mrs. Thompson's gloves, worn to transparency but carefully preserved. The reference letter from the sergeant. A Red Cross armband. She'd kept it from the medical tent, taken it somehow, saved it for 56 years as proof that medics existed, that professionalism transcended war, that someone had stopped when she begged. Also in the box, a note written in English never sent. To the British corpsman at Cell. On April 22, 1945, I sat in a medical tent covered in blood, terrified, certain of what would happen when you reached for my uniform. I begged you not to hurt me. You stopped. You held up your hands. You explained. You asked permission. You treated my fear as valid, my consent as necessary, my dignity as worthy of protection even though I was your prisoner and you had absolute power over me. That moment taught me what civilization means, not the absence of power but the restraint powerful people choose. You could have proceeded without explanation. You chose instead to stop, to explain, to ask. That choice, in that moment, restored my faith that humanity could survive war. I never learned your name. You probably forgot me within hours. Just another terrified prisoner, just another examination, just part of the day's work. But I never forgot you. I never forgot that you stopped. Thank you for asking permission. Thank you for seeing my fear and treating it as legitimate rather than dismissing it as inconvenient. Thank you for being a medic first, a soldier second, a decent human being always. Anna. Her son read it at the funeral. In the back, an elderly man, British 80s, attending by coincidence, stood suddenly. He approached after the service. I was a medical corpsman, he said in heavily accented German. At Cell. April 1945. I remember a woman in the medical tent, covered in blood, afraid. I remember explaining I needed to check for wounds, asking permission. I remember she was crying when I finished the examination, not from pain, from relief. That memory stayed with me because I'd never seen someone cry from being treated with basic professional respect. Anna's son stared. You? Maybe. There were many prisoners. But I remember her fear, and I remember choosing to explain rather than just proceed. We were trained that way. Medical treatment required consent when possible, explanation always, respect for patient dignity even in field conditions. But seeing fear transform to trust. That taught me something about the power of asking permission rather than simply taking. He left before they could ask more. Just an old medic, anonymous, who had once followed training designed by people who believed that even in war, even in the chaos of a field medical station, consent and respect mattered enough to be codified in procedure. If this story has shown you that the smallest acts of restraint echo through generations, if it's changed how you understand the choices ordinary people make under pressure, subscribe, because history's most profound lessons are hidden in its quietest moments. The tent had smelled of antiseptic and blood. A woman had sat terrified in a corner, covered in someone else's blood, bracing for violation. A corpseman had reached for her uniform and she had begged, "Please don't hurt me." He had stopped. Had held up his hands, empty and visible. Had explained what he needed to do and why. Had asked permission rather than simply proceeding. Had treated her fear as legitimate, her consent as necessary, her dignity as worthy of protection even though she was a prisoner and he held absolute authority over her body in that moment. That choice, to stop, to explain, to ask, taught more about civilization than any treaty or declaration. Because civilization isn't an ideal people aspire to in peacetime. It's a choice people make in moments of absolute power, when proceeding without consent would be easy and legal and expedient, when stopping and asking requires extra effort and time and acknowledging another's humanity even when that acknowledgement isn't required. The corpseman probably forgot within hours. Moved on to the next patient, the next examination, the endless work of sorting wounded from dying. Just another day, another prisoner, another medical assessment performed according to training and procedure. But Anna never forgot. Because that moment when he stopped and held up his hands, when he asked permission instead of taking compliance, that moment taught her that enemies could be professional, that power could be exercised with restraint, that civilization persisted in the smallest gestures of respect. The tent smelled of antiseptic and blood. The woman begged not to be hurt. The corpsman stopped and asked permission. The war had taught them fear, the peace taught them mercy.